Vanessa, let's welcome you to the program. And we've been talking quite a bit about Davos over the last few news programs, but what's your take on what happened there?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody is well aware that the Syrian foreign minister was present at Davos, but I just wanted to draw attention to something that was published by Davos actually back on the 9th of December. So then they were talking about what to expect and who's coming. Now, what's interesting, so this was one day after I actually left Damascus, and so one day after the fall of Damascus itself. And yet here they actually name Assad Hassan al-Shibani, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Syria. So did Davos and WEF have foreknowledge of what was going on inside Syria and who would be appointed the foreign minister? And then if we actually look at who this foreign minister is, this is from the Cradle, former Al-Qaeda in Syria founder, so he was a founder of Nusra Front in Syria, named as caretaker foreign minister. And who should interview him? None other than snake oil salesman himself, Tony Blair, former Middle East war envoy, and responsible really for the war against Syria since 9/11 in his relations with President Assad from 2002 onwards. So let's just have a very quick look at part of the remarkably unpleasant interview, and I apologize in advance for forcing people to watch this again if they've already seen it.
And you've obviously got a lot of different minorities in Syria, Christians, Druze, Alawites. And how confident are you that this will be a Syria for all the people, given the history and the difficulties of the past?
I can say that now, as we Syrian people, we are victims of the sectarian government. And we are also victims of this language. And we refuse to use it for the future of Syria. We are not, Syrian people, not divided into minorities. We are Syrian people. And Syria should be for all the Syrian people without any sectarian dividing, and also without to punish someone regarding on his background, social background, religious background, or sectarian group.
That was about as tough as Tony Blair got in his questioning, and his follow-up question was, what about women in Syria? And we'll come on to that, because obviously there are daily reports of atrocities committed by the HTS unelected government in Syria, still a proscribed terrorist group, conducting dozens of sectarian executions, kidnappings, and torture across Syria. And we'll just play one video that is not particularly gruesome, but it shows a young Shia Muslim man discovering that 3 members of his family have been murdered by the HTS terrorists. So if we can just play this.
يلا دخيلك والله تلفت والله تلفت والله
His anguish is very obvious. And when we're talking about women, this is Dr. Rasha Al-Ali, who was a university researcher at Homs University and a member of the Arab Writers Union, who was kidnapped on the 20th of January after she objected to the imposing of a niqab law, wearing a niqab instruction at the universities in Syria. Her body was discovered on the 25th of January with her fingers amputated and signs of extreme torture. And obviously she was killed for her views about women in Syria. And equally, Syrian Christians, of course, all minorities are being faced with ethnic cleansing, displacement, torture, etc. But particularly Christians also, who are finding that their daily life is being affected very much if we look at what was actually written in the article. And they're being harassed to effectively conform to Islamic rules and customs. They're being asked to disarm, escalating incidents of violence towards religious minorities, and even the fact that buses are being boarded to ask the women and the men to segregate on the buses, etc. So basically all minority communities are suffering under the imposition of the rules of extremist Islamist government.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. We'll have more on this a little bit later. Now, coming back to the UK then.
So, of course, the ceasefire ended in the early hours of Sunday morning. Hezbollah rejects the extension of Israel's withdrawal deadline from South Lebanon because, of course, Israel, rather than withdrawing at all, has been embedding itself further and actually encroaching further upon Lebanese territory in the south. And so what basically happened on Sunday, contrary to the recommendations even by the Lebanese army that is supposed to replace Hezbollah military in the south, but has been failing to do so because of the Israeli obstacles put in their way, but also the recommendations of UNIFIL that civilians should not return. Of course, what did they do? They returned to their homes in the south. And this is just a short video report from a local media outlet.
Defying fear and threats, the people of southern Lebanon rose with unshakable resolve on Sunday, returning to their homes as the deadline for Israel's withdrawal expired. Despite a ceasefire agreement requiring full withdrawal, Israeli forces remain entrenched, violating the deal with brutal force. As thousands of courageous Lebanese crossed into their occupied towns, Israeli forces responded with machine gun fire and shelling, killing 22 and injuring 124 civilians in cold blood. In addition to the violence, the Israeli forces arrested several civilians attempting to reclaim their homes. The Lebanese people demonstrated remarkable resilience as they marched forward despite the Israeli army's violence. From the elderly to the young, they pressed on, determined to return to their homes. The Day of Return highlights their unwavering commitment to reclaiming their lands and resisting oppression.
And so what I wanted to show now is just a video that a friend of mine very kindly took as she went to the south yesterday during the clashes between civilians. So these are not armed civilians, these are not effectively members of the Hezbollah military, they are civilians. And of course, the devastation in the south became very clear from the footage that she sent me, including, of course, the demolition of mosques, but not only mosques, of churches also, as you will see shortly. This is one of the roads into the town of Hayam that was occupied by the Zionist forces, and where civilians are still in danger of being shot or basically pushed back by the Zionist forces that are still there. Even today, a number of people were sniped as they were demonstrating against the Zionist tanks being still in their villages. Last night, there were a number of airstrikes or drone strikes in Nabatea in the south with a number of injuries. And again, this morning. And so basically, Israel refusing to leave, the people refusing to abandon their homes, and very similar scenes, of course, in Gaza with, if we watch the following video, you'll see what Hamas is describing as hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returning to their homes in the north. And Israel is claiming that it's only tens of thousands. But what is extraordinary about this, while it's very hard, of course, to describe the carnage that is being carried out by Israel, both in the south and in Gaza, what is extraordinary about it, it's the first time that Palestinians in particular have returned to their homes post-genocide or post-ethnic cleansing. So in some ways, that is a tremendous moral victory.
موت في أرضه ما بسيب أرضه يجي يتفرجوا. هاي الدليل قدام عين ترامب. بلغوا العالم كله احنا مستعدين نموت في أرضنا، ما نسيب أرضنا. أرضنا احنا تعذبنا، احنا ارتمينا، لكن ما سيبنا أرضنا. بيحلم ترامب، بيحلم إذا واحد فينا بيطلع على مصر ولا على الأردن.
And we'd actually reported previously on the plans by Moti Kohana, which is basically Mossad, to bring in US and Egyptian contractors. And actually the BBC was one of the few media outlets to pick up this story and to point out the fact that US and Egyptian contractors are now working in Gaza, screening cars as they pass through a checkpoint. But of course, the BBC doesn't find any problem with that. That is not by any means a violation of Palestinian sovereignty, which of course it is. And then, of course, this is all combined with what's going on in South Lebanon, with the increase of operations inside the West Bank, which were predicted with Trump's election, that Israel would perceive that it now has the green light to effectively ethnic cleanse Jenin and the rest of the West Bank. And if we actually look at the report itself, what they're saying is that the operation in Jenin, Operation Iron Wall, will be unprecedented in its size and scope, and that the military operation in Jenin began with a drone attack on infrastructure. He further said, military analyst Amir Bohbot further said that the operation will continue for as long as needed, noting that the goal is to secure the Israeli army's freedom of operation throughout the West Bank and destroy and neutralize terrorist, in inverted commas, infrastructure and time bombs. So basically, Gaza for the time being is finished. The Zionist movement has transferred to the West Bank.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you very much for that. Plenty to talk about in Extra today for sure. Well, Trump then has been in the media in the last day or two for many, many things, but one of the things that's grabbed the headlines has been his comments on Gaza.
Yes, I mean, as I've mentioned many times, US foreign policy is basically a tag team event. Biden devastated Gaza during his presidency, and Trump is now coming in to try and put into effect some of the ideas that were raised during the genocide against the Palestinians that began 100 years ago, but obviously intensified after October the 7th. So this is his idea to move the Gazans to Egypt and Jordan, which of course we've heard before. Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, was talking about developing the Gaza waterfront territory into a new kind of real estate project back in March 2024, and had absolutely no problem with the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in order to allow this to happen. So let's just play a section of what Trump said while he was boarding Air Force One. So the sound is not great, but I think you can pick up pretty much what he's saying.
Looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now, and it's a mess. It's a real mess.
So you'd like Jordan to house people from
I'd
Gaza?
like him to take people. I'd like Egypt to take people. I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime, I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing.
I mean, the language, we just clean out the whole thing. Now, this isn't a new idea. This is a leaked US cable on X, published by Mohammed Shahada, a Gazan analyst and journalist. So it's a leaked US cable from 2004, where Israel's Nation Security Council chief, Giora Eiland, admits that Gaza is a huge concentration camp and calls for grabbing 600 kilometers from the Sinai. And of course, it's worth pointing out that the HTS unelected government that is now in control pretty much in Syria, and of course is collaborating with Israel, has elements within Jordan and Egypt that are already to some degree being triggered to destabilize those countries, should of course they not agree with Trump's plan to deport Palestinians to both Jordan and Egypt. Now, this is quite interesting because another idea was also posed that Trump was thinking of sending 100,000 Gazan refugees to Albania. Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama on Monday rejected reports that his country is holding talks with the US on taking in 100,000 refugees. And yet again, we have the Jared Kushner connection here, who is looking at developing with Gulf money Sazan Island off the coast of Albania, which was a former Soviet Union military outpost and chemical weapons facility. Now it is Italian-Albanian, presumably working to combat drug trafficking. So interesting scenario there. I'm not quite sure how the Albanian connection comes into that. If anyone in the audience has an idea, please let us know, and we can talk about it in extra.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for that. And well, we've got to finish because we are absolutely out of time. So thanks to Vanessa. Thank you to Charles. We will be back in a few minutes on the members live stream for some extra. Stay with us. Otherwise, don't forget the interview 1 p.m. tomorrow, and back for the news 1 p.m. on Friday. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.